Hello and welcome to the latest edition of Nick Griffin Beyond the Pale. And wherever you are, thank you for joining me. And whether you're here live and in the chat or joining me later, you're all very welcome indeed. Right then, it's a little bit chaotic here actually because I had some things I really wanted to show you and they simply weren't loading up. Software glitch, and then the last minute they started. So I've been frantically trying to get those couple of things in. I think I got them into the archive for the show, but we will see in due course. Let me just dive in and check that we've got some life in the chat here. We have indeed. Oh, and that's a new one. Read it life. Good morning to you. So I guess from that you're in the USA. John Kopasaki is here. Likewise, Krista Strid, good evening to you, and Roger Madison. So we've got some life in here. That's grand. Right then, first of all, let me just free up that cable there. That'll be better. What have I got? Let's just drop this desk down a little bit, shall we? That's better, isn't it? Yeah, there we go. Over here, allow me to introduce Right Honourable Enoch Powell, one of the best prime ministers that Britain never had, and the man who, of course, in 1968 gave the amazing speech for the time, which was dubbed by the traitor media Rivers of Blood, when he said that the little cloud the size of a man's hand of immigration would one day become a terrible problem for Britain. He also said that in the year 2000, 5% of our population would be of immigrant stock, and he was derided and attacked and sacked for being alarmist. In fact, of course, by 2000, it was well higher than 5%, and now it's very, very much more than that. But I'm sure those of you who are joining me regularly, you all know that in any case. What else have we got behind me? An icon of St. Michael, an Orthodox icon, and over to that side, some of my old boxing photos from Cambridge University, which I represented in 3 varsity matches against Oxford, losing the first on points and winning with first round knockouts on the remaining 2. One of the men, or young men, I took out at that time later turned up to one of the worst of the banksters in the now 20 years old banking crisis. He once told a journalist that I was, quote, a vicious bastard, unquote. Absolutely right when it comes to banksters. Right then, so what have I got for you today? What have I got? Yeah, first of all, some things which parents especially must be aware of. If you are sending your children to a state school, this is the sort of thing that they are going to be force-fed by teachers. Where are we? Yeah, here we are. This is a book cover, current book cover, Grandad's Pride, when the little lad, who you will notice is of Sudovi Kudenhof Kalergi mixed race. Nothing wrong with the kids, but when it's done deliberately to get rid of our kids, then there is something very, very wrong with it indeed. Anyway, Grandad's turned queer. So this is all the book about how the little boy comes to terms and absolutely loves the fact that Grandad is now walking around, not with a gay pride flag. No, it's not just that. It's a trans flag. So it's actually trans Grandad. And as I say, this sort of thing is what the teachers are shoving down the throats of your children and grandchildren. Here's another one from the same thing. This is actually, it was a Daily Mail story the other day about the way in which some 70 of these books have now been identified in general release. This one, Julian is a mermaid. Come on. Now, because I want this to go out on YouTube, I won't say what I really feel about this and what needs to be done. I will merely say that the very least you can do is to protect your children from it. Hang on, get you back here. Right, and then, no, we don't want that. Go away. I'll click the wrong thing. Sorry. Remove.
Ever see?
Oh, that's it. That's what I want to show you. Here's another one from the same series of books. Well, can you imagine the impact of this on little children? It's absolutely despicable. It really is. Here we have a review. Yeah, the reviewers identify, not 70, more than 60 books from major publishing houses which feature children born in the wrong body, women with beards and mastectomy scars, and bizarre characters including a non-binary guinea pig and a male teddy bear who's sad because he wants to be a girl. Absolutely, truly shocking stuff. At least it shocks me, and I very much hope that it shocks you. And I hope that it shocks you into deciding to do something about it, whether it's homeschooling, whether it's forming a parents' protest group. And there's only one chance of a parents' protest group against this sort of thing working in Britain right now, I'm afraid, and that possibly unless you are at a religious school, such as a strongly Catholic school. Other than that, unless you've got the Muslims in the area on your side, you are not going to win, because leftist teachers will take no notice of you at all, because you are white, you're British, you're a bigot, you're scum, you're Christian, so you're a problem in all sorts of ways. The only possible way you've got of stopping this in its tracks in a British state school is Muslim parents. I'm not saying this because I like the Islamification of Britain. I do not. I'm merely pointing out that because the Muslims and the brown people are in a higher category in the eyes of leftist teachers than us, a massively higher category, that if they are complaining enough, something might be done. Furthermore, their community is sufficiently more militant that a serious undertone of, should we call it, disdain from them is far more likely to have an effect on a leftist but cowardly teacher than your concern and your disdain. So that's the score. But in the end, protest groups trying to put something right in a school system, which is rotten to the core, aren't really going to cut it, because if you protect your children from one thing, it'll come around the back door. Instead of bringing it in the books for little kids, they'll bring it in the PE lessons for the older ones or something like that. The only way you can protect your children or children in your family from the utter evil that now permeates our entire education system is to take them out of it. In the end, nothing else will do. So you've got two duties in this life. One is to have children, and the other is to rear them right so that they also have children. After that's about it. You might be involved in a war. You might be lucky not be involved in a war. You might be involved in a bad war. You might be involved in a good war. All those are mites. The only things that actually matter are having children and making sure that you have grandchildren. Beyond that, really, it's out of your hands. It's the next generation's job. But that you have to do. And I assure you, if those children in your family are taking on board this sort of stuff without any pushback, your chances of having grandchildren are very limited indeed. Right then, let me move on. Let's just bounce into the chat here and say what's going on. Good morning, Anthony H. Hello to you. As Roger Madison says, nauseating garbage. Absolutely so. So it is. Yep. Right then. So, yes, now on a similar thing. The murder, I mentioned this, talked about this last week. The murder of Anne Widdecombe and her alleged killer has now been charged with bludgeoning her to death with a hammer, hit 21 times over the head with a hammer. An old lady. Really, truly sickening stuff. But equally sickening in a way, and we still don't know the motivation, but the police have still said, well, it's some sort of terrorism. So this is far left terrorism against a woman who, having been a Conservative MP, became a member of Reform. The far left believe in terrorism. I tried to find it, haven't yet been able to. There was some of you Brits will remember Michael Foot, leader of the Labour Party, who never became Prime Minister of Britain, thank God, but was quite close to it in the 1980s. And there was a piece of footage at a Labour Party conference where Foot addresses the comrades, and he calls them comrades, and not in a nationalist sense, not in a normal sense, not in an army sense. This is comrades as in the communist sense. And Foot says, comrades, there is no limit to the violence that can be used against the fascists. It's from the leader of the Labour Party. And a huge swathe of the Labour Party and the people who run the BBC and the people who write in many of the newspapers honestly believe that Reform are fascists. Come on. The only way in which Reform are fascists actually is in the technical sense, potentially, that all of them, Farage and co, they see an increasingly close connection between the state on one side and the corporations on the other. And that is actually literally the core of fascism. But really the idea that these people are fascists, i.e. What is it? Racially aware, should we say, to put a neutral term on it, that they use violence against their opponents, that they're going to force anybody out of the country. It's absolute nonsense. But the left genuinely believe that people in reform, let alone to their right, Restore and Christian patriots and proper nationalists like us, they genuinely believe that all of us are fascists. And so we had, as well as Anne Widdecombe's alleged killer being or coming up for trial, another one is going to come up to trial quicker, is one Heather Herbert, who was a University of Aberdeen worker and a staunch Labour activist who has finally been charged by police for commenting when Heather, more on Heather in a moment, when Heather heard about the murder of Anne Widdecombe, Heather commented, "Good news for once. I hope it was an extremely painful death. I hope she was handcuffed to the bed as she screamed in agony. I'm done with being nice to pieces of human garbage like her," which is, of course, incitement for other people to go and do the same thing. Now, the University of Aberdeen just said that the comments were the individual's own and didn't represent the university's views. You imagine if anyone from the right had had said anything fractionally as appalling as that, they would have been out on their ear and with the police kicking their door down within hours. But even before the police came, everything they were associated with, their university, their employer, and all the rest of it, would have kicked them out, but not when it's the left. So anyway, let me have a quick look. I believe I've got here a picture of Heather Herbert. Yes, here we are. And Heather is certainly a Herbert. I don't think that the Herbert is really a Heather. Of course it's not. Heather Herbert is a transsexual member and hardcore member of the Labour Party, seen there, who absolutely revels in the murder, the brutal murder of people that he regards as his political opponents. That is what these people are. That's what they will do. And if they had enough power, you know, the states, the Labour Party is compelled to condemn Heather because they haven't got yet enough power to be able to say, yeah, you know what, actually, that's what we all believe, and come to think of it, we'll all go out and do it to other Anne Widdecombe's right now. It's only the fact they haven't yet got full control of this country that you haven't got death camps operating courtesy of the far left, and especially the trans left, the trans Antifa intersection. Those people would kill, torture and kill, rape, torture and kill every single one of us if they were able. And they could be able one day unless we stop them. But as a matter of fact, I don't think they've got a hope in hell, because the reaction of ordinary people to all this is getting stronger by the day. And I was speaking actually to an American just yesterday who was telling me that he's heavily involved in the Republican movement, the Republican youth movement. And he was telling me that the radicalization in a good way of Republican youth over the last 5 years has been on a staggering scale. He's really very optimistic for the future there, just because of the way in which not necessarily the whole population, but the core of the Republican Party has moved from being an utterly useless, soft, conservative with the very smallest c careerist thing into being basically hardcore nationalists who really understand the core issues. Very, very important. But coming back to Britain, the militancy is astounding. I know that Jim Dowson has talked about this a number of times recently, including the big demonstrations in Scotland against the paedophiles being put into housing estates by the authorities. And as Jim has explained, lots of people now, huge crowds, 2,000, 3,000, 4,000, have actually been putting these people out. Now, the fact that crowds of ordinary people have to use violence against paedophiles is regrettable, because if a crowd uses violence against a genuine paedophile, they're actually very, very easily whipped up next time to violence against someone who isn't a paedophile, but they're wrongly accused by their neighbour. And to have mobs running around and mob hysteria running riot is not a good thing in a civilized society. But we are no longer a civilized society. So it's better to have anti-paedophile mobs putting out paedophiles than having nothing happening at all. And certainly it's happening in a big way. And I'm going to show you a clip. This is from Springburn, up in Scotland near Glasgow, where a crowd has gathered to talk about the problem. Now, they talk about it in pretty blunt terms. The French in the 100 Years' War, 700-800 years ago, used to refer to the English soldiers as goddams, not squaddies or roast beefs or something like that, goddams. Why? Because everything they said was goddamn this and goddamn that, because that was how the English or the British swore centuries ago. The profanities were about God and Jesus. Swoons, the Cavaliers used to say, it meant God's wounds. And a Presbyterian, a Puritan would go, oh, you can't say that. It's like the C word, but 10 times over. But nowadays, because we live or have lived until very recently, still do, in a post-religious society, a post-Christian society, but not for long, more on that in a minute, because we've given up collectively on God and decency, the main swear words are, of course, sexual. And it's just standard old-fashioned Anglo-Saxon stuff. And there's plenty of standard old-fashioned Anglo-Saxonism in this, as you will hear in a moment. So if it offends you, well, I'm afraid tough, because, yeah, come on, grab a bit. It's not that bad. But if it does, cover your ears, because there's lots of effing in this. But these people are standing up for themselves. And if they eff and blind, what do people expect? When the liberal left elite destroyed the grammar school system, which was the way in which the upper echelons of the poorest parts of our country were raised up and educated and given ambitions and a scope to fulfill those ambitions, and were civilized in a really good sense of a way. And then what they had filtered down into the people who admired them in the community. And when the liberal left took that away, and the traitors in the Conservative Party did nothing to put it back, they've coarsened our people, they've crudened our people. It's not our people's fault. They see absolutely nothing wrong in this. So nor should you, as you listen to what they're saying. It's quite long, this piece. It's about 5 minutes. I might cut it short, but let's have a go, because it really does show you. Listen to these speakers and the reaction of the crowd, and the fact they're talking about going up against the state, even if they don't spell it out, and then they go and do so. This is something which would have been unthinkable a few years ago, and it's one of the signs of the new militancy growing in Britain.
Right, everybody, you're here for one reason, and it's for what happened to that wee lassie in here the other week. This can't be happening in your schemes anymore. It can't be happening in Glasgow, Dundee, Aberdeen, or Falkirk, anywhere in Scotland. This needs to fucking stop. Every single fucking day now, we hear a woman being raped. Our woman, our fucking wage, and we're only being housed in our schemes. No real fucking places in Mulgai or fucking Bears Den. Enough is fucking enough. You need to be standing up more and voicing your opinion even more on this. We can't let these cunts let us go quiet. That's what they want. They want you to be suppressed. They don't want to hear your fucking voice. I want everybody in this fucking scheme to let the establishment know that we will fucking change this. And if we force our fucking political ways, we'll fucking do it. No matter what. That's all I've got to say on the matter. I everybody, I can only advise you on what to do next. I get told there's a bunch of flats here but they're all housed. I think you should go there and make your voices fucking heard. Yes, that's what I think. So I appreciate the locals to start marching forward then. Please know where to go. Back way.
Go there and make your voices effing heard. And they go there and they do more than that. Interesting stuff. Yeah, I thought I had better cut that short, because the more, when I've listened to it again, one, we had some reverb, and two, I'm thinking about the American viewers and thinking, well, how many words in 10 can you actually understand? If one or two of our Americans would like to give me a figure, words out of 10 you can understand, I'd be very interested indeed. But that was the protests in Glasgow a couple of days ago. and quite remarkable stuff, I think. But it's not just Glasgow, it's not just Scotland, although Scotland, like Northern Ireland, are particularly sort of in advance on this, although of course it was the English who rioted after Southampton. They weren't particularly big riots, actually, by English standards they were. But my wife and eldest daughter were coming down from Cumbria the other day, and they stopped at a service station, and they came across 5 or 6 young, biggish blokes with a very striking T-shirt. All of them had the same T-shirt on, which was the flags of the British Isles, including Ireland, and a big cross, and words of obviously about faith and commitment and so on. And they got talking to them, and so, you know, who are you and what are you doing? Now, Blackpool, for those of you who don't know, is a town on the northwest of England. It was in my constituency. Did a lot of work there over the grooming gangs scandal. It's where young Charlene Downs was groomed, disappeared, and by police accounts at one stage, they covered it up in the end, turned into kebabs. Blackpool was a very vibrant, lively place. It's where people from all over the north of England and for a couple of weeks of the year, Glasgow and so on, they went there on their holidays. Before packaged holidays abroad, it was the place to go for a good working class holiday in the north of England. And it was very prosperous on the back of that, and a fine place. And in recent years, it's become a desperately sad place. Very poor, very run down, and assorted councils have paid Blackpool Council to take their scum and especially their drug addicts. And with houses of multiple occupancy, this isn't an immigration problem. This is homegrown scum, particularly the druggies. The place was what I believe Donald Trump called a shithole in other contexts. It really was. Still is, for that matter. One of the lowest life expectancies for men in the entire country, and really a desperate place. But these young fellas, here's the T-shirt that they were wearing. So, faith, community, hope, transformation for the people Blackpool, and that's Blackpool Tower there next to the cross. It's the great landmark. Community, recovery, faith, education. There's a quote there's a Bible verse, Matthew 22, and then love God, love people, change lives. Quite remarkable. And these young men were all utterly committed Christians. I don't think, I guess, that it's exactly a theologically perfect Christianity. It's definitely got, even just hearing what they were saying and so on, it's got vibes of the evangelical stuff, obviously. But that's one hell of a lot better than sitting there doing yourself to death with drugs, stealing from your neighbours in order to pay for it, which is where those young men were. I've watched a few of the videos, and one of them, a big chap, they do an awful lot of gym stuff. They're saying, you know, you've got to get fit and healthy, get your body clean, help get your mind clean, train with your brothers. It's all about, you're not alone. You're not the only one who's felt like you may as well kill yourself. We've all been there. Come with us, brother, and we'll help you to put it right. And they do. And one of the young fellas they got on there, big bloke, saying, I've been clean of crack cocaine for 6.5 years. Wow. What proportion of people on crack cocaine, if ever, get off it at all? I think the answer is, without God, none. It's virtually impossible. But these aren't special people who've been put through an enormous and very expensive rehab program. They haven't been able to go somewhere and have all the experts, like all the scumbags from Hollywood, go and so on. No, these are young men who pulled themselves out of that and everything that goes with it by their own bootstraps and with the Bible and the Word of God. And it's really a remarkable thing. And I unfortunately couldn't get the video that I've been sent, which was off Instagram, showing these young fellas training. I couldn't get, because it really was something quite remarkable. You have to take my word for it. That yes, they're all bare-chested, which is a bit strange when you're, you know, Christians and all the rest of it. Why do you have to run around with bare chests? But it's a sort of fashion, especially in gyms and so on. It was an outdoor gym training exercise, and they were doing star jumps and hops and so on, and then they're running through the woods. But there's 50 or 60, and these are tough, seriously, not in the gym all day and with lots of steroids, just healthy young men, and men in their 30s as well, out running all together, every single one of them, one of our people. And in everything they say, there's nothing racial, but the flags, it's us. This is tribal. This is about a band of brothers. It's about our people being brothers. And this also, just like Springburn, this in Blackburn would have been even more unthinkable. Actually, the idea that a crowd of people would get together to put out paedophiles in a rough area of Glasgow isn't as unthinkable as the idea of 50, 60 young men from one of the most deprived and desperate places in England, putting the drugs and the crime and the alienation behind them and getting together and standing with their brothers and going out and saying we're going to try and help other people and we're going to make our community a better place. This is an amazing development. Nothing has been seen like this since the darkest days of the Industrial Revolution, when a drunken, demoralized English proletariat did exactly the same thing. Got religion, got respectable, and pulled themselves up out of disgraceful, disgusting conditions and made themselves a better people. And we're back there right now. It really is happening in front of our very eyes. It's a wonderful thing. Andy Lightham says, survivors reborn. They've got Holy Ghost power in their lives. Amen. Exactly so. Greg recalls the 2012 demo in Blackpool. Good for you. Great stuff. Yes. No one has said what number of the words that you could understand. I wanted to see that from some of you Americans. Ivan C. Grammar schools, equality by merit. Exactly so they were. One of the great crimes against the British working class by the Labour Party, the destruction of the grammar schools. One day they must be rebuilt. One day on the other side of the disaster. Right. What else have I got for you? Yes, just to say that the thing that, or one of the things that has dragged people down into this state is, of course, the destruction of the old industries and the old communities and old decent ways out of poverty and desperation. And it's partly poverty, except, of course, that once you get into this sort of state and this cycle, it in turn produces poverty. And one of the answers to it actually is poverty, because in the end, what's wrong with our society is liberalism, atheistic liberalism. And it's that that has gutted our people and their willingness to stand up and do things that are right, and their capability to stand up and do things as a community, because individualism and prosperity and liberalism and prosperity atomizes people. It turns a people into a mass, and a mass population can achieve nothing. It takes a people, a community, to achieve things. Therefore, the more poverty you have, there is a degree of, the worse it gets, the better. Because at some stage, I'm sure you know the old saying that hard times make strong men make good times. That's where we were. And good times make weak men. Weak men make bad times. It's where we are in the cycle. But bad times make good times. Sorry, bad times make good men. And that's the point of the cycle we're about to enter. So at this stage, the worse the times are, overall, the better it is in the long run. And I've been looking at what's going on with the latest in the Iran war. And I tell you, there is an oil shock of staggering proportions coming. Now, I did think that the first time around, and so did all the experts, and all the experts talking about it now say, well, we know why we were wrong. It's because we weren't expecting such a huge release of oil reserves by everybody. We weren't expecting China to cut its use of oil by 2/5, bang, overnight. We didn't see that coming. We didn't understand how far that they had electrified their economy. We weren't expecting we slightly misunderstood the amount of oil that was still out there in the system getting there, but we certainly weren't expecting NATO to remove the sanctions against Russian oil, and Donald Trump in the middle of a war against Iran to remove sanctions on Iranian oil. So there was actually a flood of cheap oil came onto the market and made up for the fact that the oil wasn't getting through. But that's basically gone. That's the thing. And now we're back to square one, but without that buffer. So the IATA are the people who handle airline fuel, and the IAT index on fuel still at present, I think we've got Brent crude about $85, $90 a barrel, gone up a bit, but nothing particularly unusual there. But the IATA fuel index to $154 a barrel in Europe and $140 a barrel in the United States. Much, much higher, almost twice the price of the raw crude. Diesel is even worse. In Rotterdam, diesel is $80 a barrel more than crude oil. In New York, the other place where it's priced, it's $88 a barrel higher. It was yesterday, it's probably more now, than the price of crude. That's the highest ever. Now, when Donald Trump released the reserves, which Biden had already run down, but there was still a lot of oil, mainly in Cushing, Oklahoma. They've got enormous storage capability of oil in Cushing. But according to the experts, it hasn't been replaced in the last few weeks, and they are now probably 3 or 4 weeks off what they call tank bottom. When actually there's still oil in the tanks, they're not totally empty, but it's sludge. It's unusable. You put it into a lorry, you refine it, you put it into a lorry, it will foul it up. That's where we are now. And then on top of the fact that the war in Iran has started again, there's the fact that Russia in the last couple of months has seen a very drastic reduction in the oil it can produce and process and export and sell to us through the hypocrisies of it. The West, the EU, has been happily buying Russian oil, but through Turkey, through India. So paying higher prices for it, but our hands are clean because we're not buying off those naughty, naughty Russians. Well, they were, but not so much now, because if the figures for the results of NATO's strikes on Russian oil facilities are true, Russia has at present lost half of its oil production capacity. It's a different story, that, as a matter of fact, because they cannot carry on doing that. They must retaliate and stop it, or just start a full-scale war before they're choked to death. But I'm not talking about that war particularly. Jim Dowson talked about the war risk yesterday. I won't go back to that. But there's far less oil can come out of Russia now than was 2 or 3 months ago. China, likewise, was they got a nice sideline. They were importing Russian oil and, for that matter, Iranian oil, and refining it and then selling it all over the Far East to Malaysia and Japan and all the rest of it. They stopped it because they need it for themselves. So all the emergency release safety valves and all the stuff at sea, it's all gone. And then on top of that, the Houthis in Yemen have just announced that in addition to the blockade on the Straits of Hormuz, standing in solidarity with Iran against the war launched by the Israelis and Trump, they are blockading the Red Sea, and they're not going to allow any Saudi oil to get through. The Saudis have been exporting about 5 million barrels a week through a pipeline to Yanbu terminal and then shipping it through the Red Sea. That's the one that connects up to the Nile Canal, and the Suez Canal. They've stopped it. No more getting through. So it's even worse. It's far, far worse. So Donald Trump very wisely sued for peace. What was it, 4 weeks ago or so, 6 weeks ago, saying if we don't do this, about 6 weeks, if we don't do this, the whole world is going to seize up, and I'll be like President Hoover and preside over total economic catastrophe. I don't want to do that, so we're doing a deal with the Iranians. Very sensible. But of course, the Israeli lobby, as J.D. Vance has pointed out very bravely and very correctly in the last few days, the Israeli lobby wouldn't let that stand. They have forced America back to war. And Americans, don't think this is Nick Griffin saying this. This is your vice president has said, against all the odds, when it's not particularly dangerous for me, they can just put me in prison for a few weeks. For the vice president of the United States to talk about the Israeli lobby is to destroy his career in all probability, or to get himself assassinated. But Vance has said it. He said the Israeli lobby dragged us into war, and they're trying to force us back into the war, and they're sabotaging our attempts at peace. That is what your vice president is now telling you. So you better believe it. And it's left Trump now with a choice: utter humiliation, because if this war carries on for another 4 weeks, why should it stop, and gets worse, and the Iranians hit back even more at their neighbors. And by the way, it appears Iran took out the largest data center in the United Arab Emirates the other day. They're doing huge damage to all sorts of things. And if they're forced to do even more damage, they'll do such devastation to the rest of the Middle East that what Trump has warned about a few weeks ago will indeed come to pass. So in order to stop that, Trump will either have to accept an even bigger defeat at the hands of the Iranians than he did 6 weeks ago, or launch a land war. And the word on the, not on the street, but in the upper echelons of military and political power and so on, is that it's moving closer to a land war. And we're talking about something like Iraq in 2003, but on a far bigger scale. Think Iraq times 10 in terms of the cost, the number of dead Americans coming home, and the sheer chaos it produces for the world in a war that is just as illegitimate as the war on Iraq. That's what's coming. So go and fill your tanks up. Take my word for it, especially if you've got a diesel vehicle, go and fill it up and get as many plastic tubs as you can and put the diesel in that as well, because the price of this stuff is going to go through the roof. Right, how are we doing for time? 4:38. I've got a couple of other quite good things, I think, for you. But let me just dive into the chat here. Oh, dear, Ivan C., that's nasty. For the last few years, I've had a recurring dream, a nightmare, of a starving blonde-haired woman holding a dying, emaciated child standing in front of me, begging for food. Andy Lighton, there'll be rationing soon, I'm sure of it. Well, absolutely true, Andy, that it was at the start of this insane war, this wicked war. Well, they're all wicked, virtually all of them. The start of this insane and wicked war, we were told that there would be rationing. We were told that the Labour government had already worked out how they're going to do it. The French government, likewise, every government in the world was sitting there working out how they are going to do the rationing. And that was at a stage in the war when there was lots of spare reserves, as I said, one way or another, and now there aren't any. So if rationing was close then, it's certainly a damn sight closer now. You take everyone's word for it. Right then, what have I got next? Yes, coming on to a totally different subject, Islamization, which, as you know, is going on in Britain and the West, street by street, school by school, state by state. It's going on, we know this. And I was sent some information the other day by someone who said he'd been speaking to one of the men who had been involved in flying a Royal Air Force Puma HC-2 helicopter, transport helicopter, last year. And this squad of RAF men flew 16 top-level Muslim clergy from Leeds Bradford Airport, to Windsor Castle in March last year to attend an end of Ramadan celebration put on by King Charles. Q, #not my king. Unfortunately he is, but there you go. Departed at 6 a.m. from Leeds, landed at Windsor Castle at 7:10 in the morning and went back just after midday. And my contact was told this flight was one of 5 where the Air Force flew high-level Muslim clergy from other to other events as well. Hold on, I just lost my notes. I need these. Sorry about this. The former retired Air Force man told my contact that this episode, to cater for 350 Muslims to celebrate the end of Ramadan, is estimated to have cost you, if you're a Brit, a minimum of £200,000 to stage, because Charles apparently didn't pay for it himself. So I looked into this and thought, was this a one-off? And I found that this event did indeed take place last year in Windsor. Here it is. This is the great banqueting hall in Windsor Castle, And this is actually, as you'll see from it was actually a Muslim video confirming it. Ramadan Nasheed 2025, the first iftar at Windsor Castle. There you go. Now, the iftar is the celebratory meal which sees the end of the Eid fast. And Windsor Castle has been there for 1,000 years, and it's never had a Ramadan feast before, because everyone there previously, every king, every queen, every prince, every prelate of every sort, Catholic, Protestant, whatever, would have said, what on earth? This isn't Christianity, this is our faith. These are the infidels. You kill infidels on crusades. You don't have the infidels in for tea in Windsor Castle to celebrate their religious festivals. We celebrate our religious festivals in Windsor Castle. Well, of course we used to, but of course that was before we had King Charles. So I looked into this some more, and it's very interesting because this iftar thing is put on by hold on, wait a minute, let's go back. Yeah, it's the so-called the flagship initiative of the Ramadan Tent Project, an award-winning, don't know whose awards it's won, British charity, not funded by us, I hope, founded in 2013. It's the UK's largest community event during Ramadan. And the blurb about it says, designed to bring people of all faiths and backgrounds together to break their fast. Well, wait a minute, we don't have fasts during Ramadan. It's only the Muslims who do that. Anyway, it launched, that was its 2025 program, and it had its 2026 program under the theme of hope. And under that theme, it had a lot more of these events. And whereas last year's first one was hosted in Windsor Castle, it says, and I'm quoting from their website, this year in London, Open Iftar will once again return to the landmark Windsor Castle. Now, Windsor Castle is not in London, but never mind. They're saying there that Open Iftar returned this year, 2026, to Windsor Castle. Now, I've tried to find out if it did, and the interesting thing is that although they say on their website it will once again return to Windsor Castle, I can find no trace of it being there. They also went to Shakespeare's Globe Theatre, Battersea Power Station, which is now, of course, a big art gallery, and also high-profile gatherings at the British Library, Lord's Cricket Ground, a massive presence in Trafalgar Square. They went to the Baltic Centre in Contemporary Art in Gateshead, the Brighton Dome, Silverstone Circuit, King's College, Cambridge. They went to the Banqueting House in London, Bradford Live venue, the Glass Marquee in Blackburn, the Soho Theatre in Walthamstow, back to King's College, Cambridge, Shoreditch Town Hall, Battersea Arts Centre, the National Gallery, Glasgow City Chambers, the Library of Birmingham, Wimbledon. They went to Bishopsgate and they went to Trafalgar Square. And all those I could find a trace of. But about Windsor, which they said, they boasted they were going to again, nothing. So either it didn't take place, or Charles got enough flack for it last time that he's decided to do it on the quiet this time. I'm not sure what it is. I'm not sure which is worse. But in any case, that is going on. Now, by contrast with that, I don't think I uploaded a picture for this. The Daily Mail just the other day ran a near hysterical, bile-filled article about the Woodlanders Initiative, which is a group of people, good, solid British, primarily English patriots, who said, you know what, we are absolutely sick of having nowhere where only we go. All our spaces are open to them. There's nowhere which is just for us. They, by they I mean all the different groups, not just Muslims, the Muslims, the Jews, the blacks, everybody. They all, the Hindus, the Sikhs, they all have their spaces that are only for them. And fair enough, of course. Why should they be forced to accept, drug dealing, drug using scumbags from Blackpool? Of course they shouldn't be. They should be allowed, they must be allowed to have their spaces. But we're not allowed our spaces anywhere. So the Woodlands Initiative set about creating this, and they said, we're going to raise enough money to buy a piece of woodland, and then another and another. And the Mail last year ran a huge story saying that they're quietly buying up land in the UK in a bid to create whites-only enclaves. No, they're not. They're not going to live there. They're just buying some land where they can take their children and their grandchildren, their nephews and their nieces for a weekend summer camp every now and again, knowing it'll only be our people there. But the Daily Mail and the whole of the media elite absolutely detests these people. So whereas with Iftar, it's state funded, this forcible promotion of the forcible Islamization of Britain, any effort by our people to do something to celebrate our culture, to preserve our identity, is automatically, basically, it puts you out there with Adolf Hitler and Genghis Khan. And this is the real problem, actually. The real problem isn't so much Iftar. Yes, it's entirely wrong that it's subsidized by taxpayers' money, but I'm happy that Muslims living in Britain go to Iftar celebrations because it sets them apart as a community, and it helps to keep their community separate from our community. Because when you're only 8% of the world's population, when you're going to be a minority in your own homeland by 2060, when you're in that position, which is where we are, any form of assimilation is annihilation. Assimilation isn't a good thing. It's not a few foreigners assimilating to us and just becoming like us so we keep our ways. Assimilation, when you're a minority, means extermination. Might be relatively painless. It may be completely bloodless, but it is still cultural and genetic disappearance. Assimilation is disastrous for us. So having Muslims going to all their Iftar things, that's fine by me, so long as it's not funded by the British state and supported by our bloody monarch, who's supposed to be here for us, supposed to be the defender of our faith, not of other faiths. And if he's not capable of doing that, he shouldn't be our monarch. It's as simple as that. But the problem isn't that the Muslims or the Sikhs or the Hindus have their things, it's that we don't have ours. And the great war, political war of our time, is to secure for the right of our people in our country, and the same is true for the French people of France, for the Swedes in Sweden, the Germans in Germany, for European Americans in America. It's to secure for our right to self-associate and to have places and institutions only for our people. And that's what we have to do. Now, time has run out, and I found, again, because I want to try and put these things out more on YouTube, and YouTube gives copyright strikes if you use mainstream music and so on. I found just the other day a clip which I thought had been, well, possibly lost forever. Where have we lost it? Oh, here it is. That's it. That I've not been able to find any major speeches of mine from back in the day. And lo and behold, I found, broken up into 5 clips because it was too long in those days to put on YouTube and for people to download, a speech I made at the Red, White and Blue, our festival, the festival for our people, which the British National Party developed once a year in the summer. Red, White and Blue 2007. And I'm going to put the whole thing on my Substack, Nick Griffin Beyond the Pale. Do come and join me there if you haven't already. But for now, I thought I'd end this one as an end slate with, this is a section of my speech at the Red, White and Blue. It's a speech given in blazing hot sun, so I'm in just shirt sleeves and occasionally picking up a bottle of water. It's just from a handful of scrappy notes. I am not reading this off those infernal screens that all the so-called politicians and orators now do. It's not quite off the cuff. I've got a handful of little post-it notes. And anyway, I'm speaking from the heart to an audience which really gets it. And if you weren't there, and if you haven't heard what we used to talk about and how 19 years ago, me, my comrades in the British National Party and proper nationalists like us all around Europe, we were talking about the problems that everyone is now talking about. The difference is that we really intended to do something about them, whereas the ones now just intend to use them to get elected. So nothing's going to change. The things which we talk about, the things we're concerned about, if they worry you, you have got to take steps to deal with it and secure a future for your children, your community, yourself. And don't believe anyone else is going to come and help you. But you don't need anyone else. ourselves alone is quite enough. I will leave you with this clip from me at the Red, White and Blue, a plea for you to join me on Substack, to join me next week, Wednesday, 4 p.m. Here on Purge TV, Nick Griffin Beyond the Pale, and to join Jim Dowson, also on Purge, tomorrow night at 4 p.m. Until then, do please remember that all that is necessary for the triumph of evil is that good men and women do nothing. So you are good men and good women. So get out there and do something good. There's Filth.
Just down the road. And if you've been here of a night like last night, some 65 years ago, you'd have heard bombers droning overhead. You'd have seen the spotlights. We'd have had the lights on the big wheel off for a start. You'd have seen spotlights pinpointing out through the night sky, trying to pick out German bombers, heading for Derby and heading for the industries like that Rolls-Royce factory to try and take out Britain's war effort. So when, for a start, these liberals say, by what right are we so special? Well, for a start, because our fathers and grandfathers and grandmothers and mothers, they, in towns like Heanor and Eastwood and cities like Derby, up and down this country, went through a blitz and a bombing and a world war to keep the freedom of this country. And that was a war which really and truly should never have involved us in the first place. It shouldn't have been our fight. But once it became, for various reasons, our fight, it was a fight for our freedom, for our traditions, for our freedom of speech, for our properly tolerant society. It was, once it was on us, a just fight. And the people in places like this were all of them part of that fight. And that's why, that's the first reason we've got the right to say, this is our country, ours. And if you come here via a sat-nav, it's taken you through various little villages in the last few miles. And if you looked, or when you go back that way, you look, every single one of those little villages, little tiny villages, has got a war memorial with a few names on it from the Second World War and a whole heartbreaking list from the First World War. And every place around here sent young men, some only 15, lying about their age, off to that war. To fight to keep this country for us, to fight to keep our values and our way of doing things here for us, every single one of them. And when they ask these liberal scum, by what right do we maintain that we can say, no, there are certain people in the world who we simply don't want here? By what right? Because none of their names are on those war memorials. It's only Smith and O'Connor and O'Reilly and Jones and Brown and MacDonald. It's only our names on those war memorials, and that's the right by which we say this is our land and not anybody else's. Or you might have seen, some of you will know the Colin Orty song on the West Wind album, one which I penned called Brown Sign Land, about how so many of our industries and factories and mines... Sorry, it wasn't a Colin, it was a Frank song, wasn't it? Frank Atack, sorry. It was a Frank song, and very well sung too. You're almost done up on my blind side. I missed you out and you'd have killed me afterwards. I know, I'll buy you a pint. But you'd have seen some brown signs around here. And there's a sign quite near here to Denby Pottery, which is actually still just about functioning. But I expect most of what they sell now, the cheaper end, comes in from Taiwan or whatever. But this place was a pottery area, like Stoke, but smaller. And people think, well, so what? Well, I spent time in Stoke, and I can tell you, there's still men and women in Stoke dying of potter's rot, dying as their lungs collapse, because it's a very dangerous, dirty, dusty, deadly profession being involved in the pottery industry. And also this area, every single little village around here, these are pit villages. There's mine shafts all around the place under here, because generations of people here locally have worked either in the potteries, getting their lungs destroyed by microscopic pot shards, or working down pits. And when they ask us why, by what right is this our land, you can also think that even in a perfectly ordinary place like this, you've got generations of our dead in our graveyards, not from war, but from work. from overwork, from disgusting, dangerous, dirty, exploitative work, the work that paid to make this country great and huge and enormous and powerful and worthwhile and free. And they died to do that, and that's by what right we say this is our country, because our dead built it for us and for our children. That's why it's ours. Or you could go back a little bit further to the English Civil War, where the King raised his standard in 1642 at Nottingham, just down the road. And throughout a large part of the war, this was contested territory, with no enormous battles close by, but small bands of soldiers on both sides, some volunteers, some poor bloody infantry conscripts, going out and fighting and dying in pain and in mud and in appalling conditions over how we were going to run this country and how free we were going to be. And it coloured everything that we now have about our way of looking at the world and our way of running our country and running our affairs and our proper democracy, what's left of it, the one which we'll restore but nobody else. It came in large part from that war. And 1 in 10 of the population of this country died in that war, either directly in the fighting or from the disease and the sieges and the famines. 1/10 of the whole population died in a civil war to establish our right to rule ourselves and to control our masters. And that's why we reject the European Union and the trader politicians that handed us over to it, because we don't have a right to control ourselves anymore when 80% of our laws are made in Brussels. Just one tiny example. And a whole civil war wiped out 1/10 of the population of this country for our right to govern ourselves. And they've given it away. They've given it away. And there's been war after war after war like that between the people, even of this country, over various points of principle and who would do what. And all of those things mean that it's our blood has made this country what it is. It's formed its institutions. It's formed its values. It's what's made it such a wonderful place. It's the blood of generations of our ancestors. And that's why, when they ask us, by what right? Because our ancestors fought and died to make this culture and this civilization in our image and not in anybody else's. That's why it's our country. I'll go back a little bit further still. There's a castle, shattered remnants of a castle at Codner just up the road. And that castle was built by a local baron who was given the right to build it by Richard I, Richard the Lionheart, the great Crusader monarch of England. And he gave the right to Earl Grey to build that castle, and you can still see the ruins there today. And it's very fashionable now in BBC circles and Tory party circles and established church circles to run around apologising for what Richard I did and for his crusades and for Western aggression against the poor innocent Muslims. And they never for 1 minute stopped to understand or think or explain that every single one of those crusades was a defensive crusade by the West, by Europe, against an aggressive imperialistic monster from the Middle East that was a menace to us then and is a menace to us now. And this party does not apologise for Richard I. OK, he was a Norman bastard, but we'll forgive him that. We don't apologise for Richard I or for the Crusades that took place there then, or for saying that we're now in a position through the whole of the Western world where, before this generation is out, we will, unless things are turned round rapidly, have to fight a new crusade, not to secure the right of Christian pilgrims to visit the Holy Land, but for the right of people to worship as Christians in our land. So no apologies. And again, if it hadn't been for a number of generations of soldiers and military leaders, not just in Richard I's time, but later and before, through the various nations of Europe, then we wouldn't even have a Western, Christian or secular democratic society and civilization to protect. So no apologies. And again, when they say, by what right do we maintain that we want a democratic, free Christian society where women are treated as equals, where animals are treated well. By what right do we demand the right to exclude the Muslim world? Because generations of our forefathers fought to do so, and by doing so they made this a better country, and they made this world a better world. That's by what right, we say. We want to keep it that way. And finally, in recent history, a couple of miles west of here, there's a Roman road.